Ethan had never believed in miracles or mysteries beyond science. He was a man of logic, a wildlife researcher who spent most of his time studying animal behavior in quiet, isolated places. His latest project brought him to a lonely base near a massive meteor crater in the desert. The crater had always been strange. Compasses went wild, signals disappeared, and sometimes the air shimmered as if reality itself was bending. But for Ethan, it was just another research site. One cold night, everything changed. The sky turned an unusual shade of blue, glowing as if the stars had moved closer to Earth. The wind howled and carried a strange humming sound that made his heart race. Ethan stepped out of his cabin, pulling his jacket tighter. He looked up just in time to see a streak of silver light shoot across the sky and crash somewhere near the crater. The ground shook softly beneath his boots. For a moment, everything went quiet again. Curiosity and instinct pushed him forward. He grabbed his flashlight and emergency kit, then started walking toward the crash site. The air around the crater was different now, warmer, filled with a faint metallic scent. As he climbed down the rocky slope, his flashlight beam caught something moving. At first he thought it was just smoke or debris, but then he saw it, a creature lying among the rocks, breathing weakly. It looked like a large dog, but not any kind he'd ever seen. Its fur shimmered like silver under the moonlight, and its eyes glowed softly with blue light. Strange marks ran along its body, glowing faintly like tiny constellations. Ethan froze. His mind told him it was impossible, but his heart told him the creature was alive and needed help. Slowly he approached. "Hey there." "It's okay," he whispered, his voice gentle. The creature lifted its head and their eyes met. In that instant, Ethan felt something. Not fear, but connection, as if the creature understood his words. He noticed one of its legs was bleeding from a sharp piece of metal. Without thinking twice, Ethan removed his jacket, wrapped it around the wound, and carefully lifted the creature into his arms. It was surprisingly light, almost weightless, as if gravity didn't affect it fully. Step by step, he carried it back to his base through the cold wind and flickering blue lights in the sky. Back inside, he laid the creature on a soft blanket and began cleaning the wound. It didn't resist, only watched him quietly with those glowing eyes. He could feel a strange warmth radiating from its body. When he poured antiseptic over the cut, the liquid shimmered and seemed to evaporate instantly. "You're not from around here, are you?" Ethan murmured with a nervous smile. The creature blinked slowly, almost like it understood. He gave it water, but it didn't drink. Instead, it seemed to absorb the moisture through its skin. Everything about it broke the laws of biology he knew. Hours passed, and Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat near the creature, watching its breathing grow steadier. The storm outside faded, replaced by quiet moonlight streaming through the small window. Every now and then, he thought he heard a faint sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a word. Almost like whispers trying to form sentences. By morning, the creature was stronger. When Ethan checked on it, he found it sitting up, alert but calm. Its fur caught the sunlight and scattered tiny reflections across the room. Ethan couldn't help but whisper, "You're beautiful." He set up a camera and began taking notes, the scientist in him now wide awake. He measured the creature's temperature. It was slightly higher than human, but steady. Its heartbeat was rhythmic, yet he could hear faint tones in it like distant music. Then something even stranger happened. When Ethan reached to change the bandage, the creature tilted its head and made a sound, soft, melodic, almost like speech. Ethan froze, staring. What did you just say?" he whispered. The creature repeated the sound, this time clearer. It wasn't English, but somehow Ethan felt like he understood the meaning behind it. It wasn't language, and it was emotion. The creature was thanking him. Ethan spent the rest of the day observing quietly, speaking softly to it as he worked. "I guess I should call you something," he said, thinking aloud. "Silver? No. Maybe Lyra." "Yeah, Lyra suits you." The creature looked at him when he said the name, then blinked slowly as if approving. Ethan laughed softly to himself. "Okay, Lyra it is." That night, Ethan sat by the window looking at the stars. His thoughts were racing. He knew he should report the event, but something inside told him not to. Scientists, governments, they would turn Lyra into an experiment. He couldn't let that happen. She wasn't a specimen. She was something more. As the night deepened, Lyra stood and limped closer to him. She sat beside him, her head slightly tilted. Ethan smiled. You're not afraid of me anymore, huh? The creature made a soft sound that almost resembled laughter. Ethan reached out slowly, and to his surprise, she placed her paw gently on his arm. A faint glow passed through her touch, not painful but warm and calm, like a heartbeat shared between two living souls. At that moment, Ethan felt something he couldn't explain, a quiet understanding that this being wasn't just an animal. She was intelligent, aware, and possibly from a world far beyond his imagination. For the first time in his life, Ethan's world of science and logic felt too small. As Lyra rested beside him, breathing softly, he realized he had stepped into a story that no textbook could explain. Outside, the desert was silent again. The blue glow in the sky faded completely, leaving behind a clear field of stars. But deep inside Ethan's small research cabin, a bond had begun, one that would lead him into the strangest and most beautiful chapter of his life. He looked once more at Lyra before turning off the lamp. "Don't worry," he said softly. "You're safe here." Lyra's eyes glowed faintly in the dark, like twin stars watching over him. The silence felt peaceful now, no longer lonely. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. This was no ordinary creature, and this was no ordinary night. It was the beginning of something that would change everything. For both of them. Ethan woke early the next morning, unsure if what had happened the previous night was real or a strange dream. But when he turned toward the blanket in the corner of his cabin, the proof was right there, and the silver creature, Lyra, was awake and watching him with calm blue eyes. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other. Ethan smiled nervously. "Good morning," he said softly. He didn't expect a reply, of course, but then Lyra made a low sound that almost felt like a greeting. It wasn't quite speech, but it wasn't an animal sound either. It was something between music and thought, gentle and intelligent. Ethan decided to take a slow approach. He placed a bowl of water and some food near her, then stepped back. "You need to eat something," he said, motioning with his hands. Lyra tilted her head, studying him carefully, and then touched the water. Instead of drinking, the water glowed faintly and disappeared into her skin again. Ethan blinked in surprise. "Right, I forgot. You're not exactly from Earth." He sat down at his desk and began recording everything in his journal. "Subject shows advanced understanding and unusual biological traits," he muttered as he wrote. "Seems capable of absorbing moisture directly through contact. Communication attempt possible." Lyra watched him with quiet curiosity, her eyes moving with every stroke of his pen. Then she made another sound, this time a long hum that filled the room. The air seemed to vibrate softly, and Ethan felt a faint tickling sensation inside his head, as if someone was whispering directly into his thoughts. A voice, calm, feminine, and distant, echoed in his mind. "Human. You understand?" Ethan froze. He looked around the room, heart pounding. "Who said that?" The voice came again, clearer this time. "Do not fear. It is me, Lyra." Ethan slowly turned to the creature. You can speak?" he asked in disbelief. Lyra tilted her head slightly. "Not with voice. With thought. Your kind speaks with sound. Mine speaks with energy." Ethan rubbed his forehead, trying to process what was happening. "This is incredible. You're using telepathy?" Lyra blinked slowly, her eyes glowing brighter. "Telepathy. Yes, that is your word. It is our way of connection." Ethan couldn't stop smiling. The scientist in him was thrilled, but the human in him was simply amazed. "You're amazing," he said softly. "Where are you from, Lyra?" For a few moments she was silent. Then her thoughts filled the air again. "A world far from here. We call it Elora, a place of light, where the sky never sleeps." Her descriptions painted pictures in Ethan's mind. Floating lands glowing in the dark, silver forests that hummed with sound, and rivers that reflected starlight instead of the sun. It was beautiful, almost like a dream. Ethan listened carefully, asking questions, taking notes, and sketching what he imagined. Lyra, in turn, asked him about Earth, about the people, the animals, the wars, and the kindness that humans showed to one another. Some of her questions made Ethan think deeply. "Why does your kind fight over land?" she asked. "When all of you share the same sky?" Ethan paused, unsure how to answer. "It's complicated," he admitted. "Humans are still learning to understand each other." Lyra looked at him thoughtfully. "Then maybe my fall was not an accident. Maybe I'm here to understand you. Over the next few days, their bond grew stronger. Lyra learned to use some English words through the translator device that came with her. It was a small crystal sphere she carried when she crashed, now reactivated by Ethan's solar panels. With its help, her voice could be heard through a soft, echoing tone. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed her to speak aloud in short, simple sentences. One afternoon, as Ethan worked on repairing some broken lab equipment, Lyra stood beside him, watching closely. "You fix things," she said, her voice slow but clear. Ethan smiled. "Yes, that's what humans do when something breaks." She tilted her head. "You fix?" "Me too." The words caught him off guard. He turned and looked at her. "I just did what anyone would do." Lyra's eyes glowed softly. "Not anyone. Some would run. Some would fear. You stayed." Ethan didn't know what to say. There was something in her tone, gratitude mixed with something deeper, a quiet understanding that went beyond words. As days passed, they began exploring the crater together. Lyra's strength was returning quickly. She moved with grace, scanning the environment with her glowing eyes. Ethan noticed that when she touched the ground, small symbols appeared for a moment, then vanished. "What are those markings?" he asked. Lyra paused. "Memories of my journey," she replied. "They tell my people where I have been." She knelt down and touched the soil again, leaving another faint mark. It shimmered like starlight before fading away. Ethan watched in awe. "It's like your world's version of writing." Lyra nodded. "Yes. Every mark holds a piece of our story." That night, as the wind blew softly outside, Ethan and Lyra sat near the cabin's heater. The silence was peaceful. Ethan asked her if she missed her home. For a long time, Lyra said nothing. Then in a low voice, she replied, "Yes, but my people believe every path leads to meaning. Perhaps this is mine." Ethan felt a strange sense of comfort in her words. "Maybe you were meant to be here," he said. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the warm light. "Maybe we were meant to meet," she replied softly. From that moment, something unspoken grew between them. Not romance, but trust. Two beings from different worlds finding connection in understanding and kindness. Days turned into weeks. Ethan continued his research, but now his focus was different. He wasn't just studying an alien life form. He was learning from a friend. Lyra taught him how her species communicated without fear or anger, how they believed energy connected all living things. In return, Ethan taught her about Earth, its beauty, its art, its hope. Sometimes Lyra would look at the stars and say, "Your world is loud but full of heart." Ethan would laugh. That's a good way to describe it. One evening, as the sun set in orange light, Lyra suddenly grew serious. "Ethan," she said through the translator, "the storm that brought me here was not natural. Something followed me." Ethan frowned. "Followed you?" "What do you mean?" Lyra's eyes dimmed slightly. "A pulse, a weapon. It wanted to erase me." Ethan's stomach tightened. "You mean someone tried to destroy you?" She nodded. "Not someone, something, a machine without mercy." The air between them grew heavy. Ethan realized this was far bigger than he had thought. Lyra's presence wasn't just an accident. It was the start of something larger, something that might change not just their lives, but the fate of both their worlds. As the wind howled outside and the stars shimmered faintly above the desert, Ethan whispered to himself, "I guess our story's just beginning." Lyra turned her gaze toward him and said quietly, "Yes, human, it has only begun." Days passed quietly after Lyra's warning about the machine that had followed her. Ethan tried to keep calm, but the thought of something dangerous out there never left his mind. Still, the days had a strange peace to them. The sun rose every morning over the desert, painting the crater in golden light, and Lyra's soft glow filled the cabin each night. Ethan had never lived with another being who understood him without words. He had always been a loner, someone who preferred notebooks and microscopes to people. But with Lyra, silence was never empty. She would sit beside him while he wrote, sometimes humming softly in her strange musical language. The air around her always felt alive, like quiet energy moving through the room. One morning, Ethan was studying a small device that had fallen from the wreckage of Lyra's landing. It looked like a crystal core, covered in symbols that glowed faintly when touched. Lyra watched him closely. "Be careful," she said in her calm, echoing voice. "That holds memory from my ship." Ethan looked up. Memory, you mean data? Lyra nodded. Yes, it records thought and vision. It can show what I saw before the crash. Ethan's eyes widened with curiosity. Can we see it? Lyra hesitated. It may frighten you. I'll be fine, Ethan said with a half smile. Lyra placed her paw on the device and the cabin filled with a soft blue light. The air shimmered and suddenly images appeared, floating above the floor like holograms. Ethan saw a vast silver landscape with two suns in the sky. Beautiful towers floated above glowing rivers, and beings like Lyra moved gracefully across bridges of light. Then the scene changed. A shadow covered the horizon, a dark storm filled with mechanical shapes. Strange machines flew toward the towers, releasing bolts of energy that tore the sky apart. Ethan watched, frozen, as Lyra's world burned. What are those? He asked quietly. Lyra's voice was heavy. They are collectors. Machines made long ago by our own ancestors. They were created to protect us, but they turned against life itself. They believe only metal should survive. Ethan stared at her. You escaped them? Yes, she replied softly. But they tracked me. When I entered your world's sky, my ship broke apart. I thought I was alone. Until you found me. The light faded, leaving silence in the cabin. Ethan sat down slowly, running a hand through his hair. So you're not just lost and you're being hunted. Lyra nodded. But here they cannot reach easily. Your world is far and strange to them. Ethan looked out the window toward the quiet desert. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, Then we'll keep you hidden. You're safe here. Lyra looked at him with soft eyes. You would risk for me? Ethan smiled faintly. You're my friend, Lyra. That's what friends do. From that day on, their bond grew deeper. Ethan taught Lyra about Earth science, history, and nature. They spent hours outside the base, exploring the desert together. Lyra was fascinated by Earth's animals. She once spent an entire hour watching a desert fox and called it a small fire spirit. In return, Lyra taught Ethan about her people's ways. She showed him how they could share energy through touch, not to harm or control, but to understand each other's emotions. One evening, as the sun set behind the rocks, she asked, Would you like to see as I see? Ethan hesitated, unsure what she meant.
See like you?
Lyra nodded. Just for a moment. You will not be hurt, he agreed, and she gently placed her paw on his chest. A soft light spread from her touch. Suddenly, Ethan's surroundings changed. The desert around him glowed with threads of blue and gold light. Every plant, every rock, every grain of sand connected by invisible energy. He could feel the heartbeat of the world around him, steady and calm. When it ended, Ethan was speechless. That was beautiful, he whispered. Lyra smiled. Now you know why we say every life is part of one song. After that experience, Ethan began seeing the world differently. He noticed things he had ignored before. The sound of the wind, the sparkle in the stars, the way even silence seemed alive. Lyra's presence had changed him, but as their friendship deepened, strange events began to happen again. The nights grew colder, and sometimes Ethan could hear faint mechanical noises echoing through the desert. Lyra's eyes would glow brighter whenever she sensed it. The storm is near, she whispered one night. The air tastes of iron. Ethan wanted to believe it was just his imagination, but the readings from his instruments showed unusual energy waves coming from the crater. Something was waking up. Still, life inside the cabin continued in quiet rhythm. Ethan cooked simple meals while Lyra rested and recovered her strength. Sometimes they talked late into the night about their worlds. One evening, while fixing an old radio, Ethan said with a chuckle, You know, if people found out I'm living with an alien dog, they'd lock me up. Lyra tilted her head in mock confusion. Dog? Ethan grinned. Yeah, it's what humans call creatures like you. 4 legs, fur, loyal, Lyra blinked. Then humans must be wise. My people say loyalty is the highest form of courage. Ethan laughed. Maybe we're not so different after all. But beneath the humor, a quiet truth grew between them. They had started to rely on each other. Lyra's calm voice gave Ethan peace, and Ethan's kindness gave Lyra hope. One night, a bright storm appeared on the horizon. The sky filled with flashes of green and blue lightning. Lyra stood at the doorway, her fur glowing faintly. The stars are speaking, she said softly. Ethan stood beside her. What are they saying? She looked up with a faraway expression. They say a choice is coming, and for both of us. Ethan frowned. A choice? Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer and placed her paw gently against his hand. Whatever comes, you will not face it alone. In that simple moment, something changed. A quiet promise made without words. Later that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window looking out at the crater. The strange hum was back, faint but real. He glanced at Lyra, who was resting peacefully, and whispered to himself, "Whatever's out there, I'll protect her." As he watched, a small blue spark flickered at the edge of the crater. It disappeared after a second, but Ethan knew it wasn't lightning. Something was moving beneath the earth, something that didn't belong. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Tomorrow we find out what's really going on." Outside, the desert wind carried a distant metallic echo, the first sign that the peace they had built was about to be tested. The next morning, Ethan woke before sunrise. The world outside was still quiet, but the strange hum from the crater hadn't stopped. It was faint yet steady, like a heartbeat coming from the earth itself. Lyra was already awake, standing near the window with her glowing blue eyes fixed on the horizon. Her fur shimmered faintly in the dim light. "It's growing stronger," she said softly. Ethan nodded, rubbing his tired eyes. "Yeah, I can feel it too. It's like the ground's alive." He turned on his monitoring equipment and lines of data flashed across the screens. Energy readings were rising fast. Something underground was pulsing, matching Lyra's energy pattern almost perfectly. It was as if whatever was buried in the crater was calling out to her. Lyra took a deep breath. "The collector may be waking. It followed me here through the void. It hides beneath your world's skin." Ethan frowned. "Then we need to stop it before it finds you." Lyra looked at him calmly. "No, Ethan, it will not stop until it finds me. That is its purpose. But perhaps there is another way." Ethan didn't like the sound of that. "What do you mean, another way?" Lyra turned toward him. "My ancestors built a defense, an ancient signal buried within us. If I awaken it, I may be able to shut the collector down, but—" She hesitated, her voice quiet. "It will cost energy. Maybe all of mine." Ethan's heart sank. "No, you're not doing that." Lyra smiled gently. "You forget I'm not human. My life belongs to the song that connects all worlds. If my end keeps that song safe, then it is not truly an end." Ethan stood there, struggling to find words. He had faced many things in his life. Storms, wild animals, loneliness, but never the fear of losing something he cared about this deeply. "We'll find another way," he said finally. "I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself." Lyra said nothing more. She just looked at him, her glowing eyes soft with understanding. They spent the day preparing. Ethan packed food, tools, and batteries. Lyra guided him to a narrow path that led deep into the crater. As they descended, the air grew warmer, and strange lights pulsed from cracks in the ground. The hum grew louder with every step. Ethan held his flashlight tightly, his heart pounding. "You're sure this is safe?" Lyra gave a faint smile. "No, but it is necessary." At the base of the crater, they found a metallic structure half buried in rock. It looked ancient, like something that had been sleeping for centuries. Symbols glowed faintly on its surface, similar to those on Lyra's fur. Ethan approached carefully. "Is that part of your ship?" Lyra shook her head. "No, this is older. It came before even my people. It may have called me here." Before Ethan could respond, the ground trembled. A sudden burst of blue light shot from the metal structure, forcing him to shield his eyes. When the light faded, a tall, dark shape emerged from the center. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. A machine made of shifting plates with no clear form, its surface reflecting the desert light like liquid glass. Lyra stepped forward. "Collector," she said firmly, "you do not belong here." The machine's voice was cold, emotionless and echoing. "You carry forbidden energy. Return it or be erased." Ethan's instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't leave her. "Lyra, we need to move," he shouted, but Lyra stood her ground. "Ethan, go. This is my burden." "No," he yelled back. "Not alone." The collector advanced, its metal limbs stretching and twisting like shadows. Lyra closed her eyes, her fur glowing brighter and brighter until her entire body shimmered with white-blue light. The markings along her side began to spin and pulse in rhythm. Ethan could feel the energy in the air. It vibrated through his bones. Then, something incredible happened. The translator device on her chest flickered and spoke. But the voice wasn't just Lyra's anymore. It carried multiple tones, like a choir of her kind speaking through her. We are the children of light. We do not destroy, we create. The ground shook as the collector raised one of its arms, preparing to strike. But Ethan didn't think. He ran to Lyra's side and placed his hand on her shoulder. "You're not doing this alone," he said. Instantly, the glow from Lyra spread into him. His body felt warm, surrounded by waves of energy. For a moment, he could see what she saw. The threads of life, the endless web connecting every living thing. His mind filled with images of stars, oceans, and light moving through time. Lyra turned to him, her voice echoing inside his head. "Ethan, what have you done?" "I told you," he said through the light, smiling faintly. Friends don't leave each other behind. Together, their combined energy grew stronger. The collector hesitated, its liquid metal form flickering like static. Lyra raised her head high, her voice ringing through the crater. "You cannot end what is part of the song." A burst of pure white light exploded outward, shaking the desert for miles. Ethan was blinded for a moment, then everything went silent. When he opened his eyes, the collector was gone. Only a faint shimmer of dust hung in the air where it had stood. The metallic structure had stopped glowing. The hum beneath the earth had vanished. But Lyra had collapsed on the ground, her light fading. Ethan ran to her side, his chest tight with fear. "Lyra, stay with me." Her breathing was weak, but she smiled faintly. "You did not listen," she whispered. "Yeah, I'm bad at following orders," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "Please don't go, we did it." "You're safe." Lyra's eyes flickered softly. "Safe, yes. But my energy is fading. The bond we made, it changed me. And you." Ethan didn't understand at first. Then he noticed his hand. It glowed faintly with the same blue light as hers. "What's happening to me?" Lyra looked peaceful. "Our connection shared more than strength. It shared life. My essence lives in you now." Ethan shook his head, tears filling his eyes.
"No, you'll survive."
"We'll find a way." Lyra's voice grew quiet but calm. "Do not grieve, human. You gave me something my world forgot long ago, hope." Her light dimmed until only a faint glow remained. Then slowly her form began to fade like mist under sunlight. Ethan reached out, but his hands passed through her. The last thing he heard was her whisper. "You should prepare, human. We are not finished yet." Then she was gone. Ethan sat in the crater for a long time, staring at the spot where she had vanished. The desert wind carried silence, but deep inside him he could still feel a faint heartbeat. Not his own, but hers, echoing softly within. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Ethan stood up. He looked at his glowing hand and whispered, "I'll keep your promise, Lyra, whatever this means. I'll be ready." And for the first time he realized her words weren't a goodbye. They were a beginning. Weeks passed after the battle in the crater. The desert had grown quiet again, almost too quiet. The strange hum was gone. The metallic structures had turned to dust, and the sky above the crater was clear and calm. Yet Ethan didn't feel peace. He still woke every morning expecting to see Lyra standing by the window, watching the sunrise with her glowing eyes, but she was gone. Still, sometimes at night when the wind blew across the sand, Ethan thought he could hear her voice, soft, distant like a memory. It gave him comfort, reminding him that maybe she wasn't truly gone, only changed. Life slowly returned to normal, though nothing felt truly normal anymore. Ethan kept working at the base, writing everything that had happened in his journal. The scientists he contacted couldn't explain the strange energy readings or the melted crater floor. But Ethan didn't tell them the full truth. He kept Lyra's secret to himself. He knew the world wasn't ready. One evening, a storm rolled in, not like the others he had seen before. It wasn't violent or frightening. It was calm and glowing, with streaks of soft blue light weaving through the clouds. Ethan stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the wind. That's when he felt it, a gentle warmth pulsing inside his chest. It was the same feeling he'd felt the night Lyra had touched his heart. He looked down and saw a faint blue glow spreading from his hand again. "Lyra," he whispered. The air around him shimmered, and suddenly the sand began to move. Small lights emerged from the ground, 5 of them, floating gently before settling in the sand like tiny stars. The storm grew brighter, surrounding the lights in a soft, radiant glow. Ethan could hardly believe his eyes. From those lights, small forms began to appear. Not machines, not creatures of metal, but living beings. They looked like tiny silver-furred pups with blue eyes and soft markings across their backs. They were warm, alive, and glowing faintly just like Lyra had. Ethan dropped to his knees, tears filling his eyes. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered, laughing and crying at the same time. The smallest one stepped forward, tilting its head curiously, just like Lyra used to do. When Ethan reached out his hand, the pup placed its tiny paw against his palm, and he felt a spark of energy travel through him. In that instant, he heard her voice again, soft and full of warmth. "You should prepare, human. We're having puppies." Ethan froze, his heart skipping a beat. He knew that voice. It was Lyra's, but it wasn't coming from the sky. It came from within him, echoing through the bond they had shared. The pups surrounded him, glowing brighter, their eyes full of trust. He realized then what had happened. When Lyra's energy merged with his, it hadn't ended her. It had transformed her essence, allowing new life to be born. Part her, part him, and part something entirely new. Ethan spent the night watching over them, keeping them warm inside the cabin. Each pup had a personality of its own. One was playful, one was shy, another seemed wise beyond its small body. They didn't eat normal food but absorbed light and warmth, just as Lyra had. When they slept, they emitted soft melodies like lullabies from another world. For days, Ethan studied and cared for them. He took notes, ran gentle tests, and spoke softly to them as if they could understand. Sometimes he caught himself smiling for no reason. The loneliness that had haunted him for years was gone. The cabin felt alive again. He named them after stars: Nova, Kiri, Solon, Vexa, and Orion. Each name matched their energy pattern, glowing in different shades of blue and white. He soon realized they could communicate without words, just like Lyra had done. Their thoughts were pure, curious, and kind. One morning, while he was repairing a solar panel outside, the pups gathered at the door, watching him. Suddenly, Nova, the boldest one, walked forward and touched the sand. A faint pattern appeared beneath her paw, glowing like a constellation. Ethan stared, amazed. "Just like your mother," he whispered. The other pups joined in, forming small trails of glowing symbols that connected together in perfect harmony. Ethan realized they weren't just playing, they were writing. Their markings formed a shape that resembled a spiral of light, the same symbol Lyra had shown him before she disappeared. It was then that Ethan understood. These pups weren't only alive, they carried knowledge, memories, and a message from Lyra's world. They were her gift to Earth. Over time, word of the strange lights in the desert reached nearby towns. Journalists, scientists, and even military officials wanted to investigate, but Ethan kept the crater sealed and refused to let anyone near. He told them it was just a natural phenomenon. Nothing to study, nothing to fear. He knew the truth was safer as a mystery. As months passed, the pups grew quickly. Their powers grew too. They could sense emotions, mend broken things with light, and calm wild animals. They were gentle and wise, like guardians made of warmth and peace. Ethan built a hidden shelter near the crater where they could live freely. At night, he often sat with them under the stars, telling them stories of Earth, about music, kindness, and courage. The pups listened silently, their blue eyes shining like small moons. Sometimes they would look up at the sky, and Ethan could swear they were listening to something he couldn't hear. Maybe the distant voice of their home world calling to them. One night, as the wind whispered softly through the desert, Ethan felt that familiar presence again, Lyra's calm, comforting voice. "You kept your promise," she said gently inside his mind. Ethan smiled. "I tried," he whispered back. "They're safe. They're beautiful. They are the bridge," Lyra replied. "Half of me, half of you. The beginning of something your world will one day understand." He looked at the pups who were playing under the moonlight, their fur glimmering softly. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" he asked. Lyra's voice was full of warmth. "The song never ends, Ethan, it just changes form." As her presence faded again, Ethan sat quietly, feeling both proud and humbled. The world might never know the truth about what had happened in that lonely desert, but he did. Years later, when people spoke of mysterious blue lights seen above the crater, Ethan never confirmed or denied them. He simply smiled and said, "Some miracles aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be protected, And sometimes, when the night was silent and the stars were bright, he would see 5 glowing figures running across the sand, silver trails lighting up behind them, painting the desert in soft blue light. The world called them legends. Ethan called them family. They were the legacy of Lyra, living proof that friendship between worlds could create something far greater than either side alone. And deep inside, he knew one thing for certain. Lyra was right. He had to prepare, not for loss, but for the beginning of something beautiful. Because when 2 hearts, even from different worlds, share the same song, it doesn't end. It becomes a new melody, one that echoes across the stars forever.